Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera. We are back today with Lisa Barnett. Lisa is the founder of Akashic Knowing School of Wisdom, where she specializes in teaching you to access personal soul wisdom and guidance to transform your life, working directly with your soul's plan and the support of the Akashic Record Keepers. Lisa offers Akashic readings and quantum healing sessions to clear old soul contracts, heal trauma, release karma and vows, and to help individuals align with their soul path. So welcome, Lisa. It is amazing to have you back again.
Thank you, Christine. Always excited to be here with you.
Well, and I'm excited too to talk about trauma and the Akashic Record and how to heal trauma in the Akashic Record, because trauma, right now we're all sort of in this state of collective trauma with COVID and all of the fallout with that. So I'm excited to talk about that. But before we get to that, can you just tell us a little bit about what the Akashic Records are for people who don't know?
Absolutely. So the Akashic Record is the recording of your soul's journey through all time-space continuum. So if you imagine that when you individuated from source, everything your soul did was recorded in this energetic field that we call the Akash. It is part of source energy. It is part of the quantum field. And so you have a library in the sky, in the cloud, in the ethers, however you like to imagine it. And you have your own personal Akashic librarians who are here to be of service to you.
Excellent. And this is the Akashic Record is also talked about as the Tree of Life and the Book of Life, different kinds of things in different traditions. So this is a pretty well-established tradition and record that we have had through all of humanity and all space-time from the soul level.
Yes.
So it's a wonderful resource and a huge resource for us. And healing trauma is one of the things that the Akashic Records can be really helpful for. So you've recently done a TED Talk or a TEDx talk about this. So what had you do this TEDx talk, and how have you learned about trauma in working with the Akashic Record?
What happened was the Akashic Record Keepers asked me to do a TED Talk, right? Of course. I mostly do what they ask me to do. So I was, working on book number 3, and they were like, oh, do a TEDx also. That's just a great way to share this information. And so, of course, I always say, okay, what are we writing about, or what are we talking about? And they said, let's share about how you can heal trauma in the Akashic Record. And so I kind of course, thought, wow, that's kind of crazy big subject. And they usually have to remind me about my experience of whatever that is. So they reminded me, that I experienced a lot of trauma in my teen years. My 2 very best friends, my soul sisters, both died in very different ways.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, the first one died at 13 of a brain tumor. The other best friend, there was 2 of us, where there was 3 of us as a little very tight group of soul sisters, and we spent every day together. And I had just literally like a month or so before moved from Chicago to California. And my best friend Shubi, who lived across the street from me, who we walked to school and home every day, we were just, just about connected at the hip kind of thing. She called me and she said, Marcia's in the hospital and she just had brain surgery for a tumor and she's now in a coma.
Oh my gosh.
And as she was telling me this, I had to go to a babysitting job, right? So I'm 13 years old, no one's home. I go over to the people's house I'm babysitting for, and I'm literally babysitting for a baby who's sleeping. So I literally had a couple hours to kind of sit there and freak out. Let's just be honest, right? I had no one to talk to. I went to all of the emotions of what can I do? How can I save her? I feel like I should be able to heal her. I don't even know how. How can I do that? Why her? Why not me? All the crazy kind of stuff. I lay awake all night thinking, if only I knew how to pray, I could pray for her. I literally had a memory of being a healer, but had no idea how to access that gift. Right? I'm 13.
Yeah.
So the next morning, Shubi calls again, and Marcia had passed in the night.
Oh, dear.
This is a lot of years ago now,
Right.
So we're looking at, 50 years ago, people were less conscious about trauma and this kind of emotional pain and what it does now. Yeah. So I know that more recently, when my kids were in high school, one of the children committed suicide. And it was a terrible trauma, but they had counselors and therapists at the school. They're available to talk to these kids, and they had, a gathering, and they just did a lot around that child's death so that the other children could feel supported. Well, that wasn't true 50 years ago. That was like, my mother was like, I'm so sorry, honey, that your friend died, Well, off to school you go. All right. It was a fortune to go fly. I didn't go home to her funeral. It was a fortune back then. You didn't hop on a plane and fly somewhere, Anyway, so all of that pain, all of that emotion just kind of got stuffed down. And really what I started to do was I started to study spirituality, because I had that memory of being a healer and that deep kind of intuitive knowingness that I have been that before, that I have that gift, right? I have that ability. And so I literally started to study at 14 years old, and started reading all the spiritual books. Luckily, that's about when, late 60s, early 70s, the Maharishi was bringing transcendental meditation to the United States. And Robert Monroe, one of my favorites, wrote Journeys Out of the Body. I was always trying to escape the physical form.
Yep, I know that one.
Lots of unusual, Baba Ram Dass, I think, wrote Be Here Now back in the also late 60s. So I delved in and started to study. I minored in philosophy at the university. I was studying philosophy in high school. I was, taking classes in high school at the junior college and studying, philosophy and esoteric information. Anyway, and then my other best friend died. So there was 3 of us. So the second of the group died in a freak car accident.
Oh, dear.
And that was kind of the end of my spiritual path at that moment, because I was so distraught. I was so angry, honestly, so angry at the God who would take these young innocents, take my best friends from me, right? I really kind of personalized and victimized it myself. I said, how can you do this to me, right? Like, what about them? But anyway, and why them? Why not me? And so the Survivors Guild, I mean, just on and on, all of those things. And again, here I am in California, in San Francisco, and it's the 70s. And I decided, okay, screw this spiritual path I've now been on for, the last 6 or 7 years. I'm in college studying philosophy. I'm like, I'm over it. I'm going to go do whatever it is that people come and do. I'm going to go party. I'm going to make money. I'm going to travel. I'm going to have fun. Right.
Yeah.
And that was quite a little wormhole for me. If you can think back about the 70s and the 80s in San Francisco, I started tending bar in San Francisco. It was kind of a wild life. Anyway, there I was, just being trapped in my pain, in my trauma, and I had no idea that that's what it was until many years later. I was very, very blessed to have this intuitive gift, to have been kind of saved by my Akashic record keepers once or twice when I was really going down a dark path. And they were like, hey, you know what? That's not actually who you are. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I forgot. And so of course it was a process kind of coming back around and waking back up again. But I always had that, thank God, that somewhat of an intuitive gift. And I went back to studying again and actually spent almost 8 years studying to be an energy healer, because I knew that was kind of the strong, clear calling to me, was to be the healer. And as I was working with clients, I would get this big, expansive information sometimes. And it took quite a few years before I realized where this expansive information was coming from. But I finally realized it was the Akashic record keeper speaking to me and sharing with me Akashic record information for my client.
Before we got started talking on this particular episode, you were saying that most people who come to you for Akashic record reading come because they're stuck around something where there is a trauma at the base of it. So trauma, big and small, really congests our energy, and we kind of orbit around this trauma again and again and again until we release it. And then even still, it can take a lot of time to release it through those things. So how does that work in the records? Like, what's the dynamic when you come into the records when you are working with somebody around a trauma?
Right. Well, like you were just saying, often people will come to me and they'll say, I feel kind of blocked. I don't know what to do or where to move forward, or, to have maybe a job I like better, or to feel like it's more of my purpose. Or, of course, people often come around relationship. Is this soul contract complete, or am I supposed to stay? Is there learning or growth, or often, is there even someone out there for me? I've been alone for 5 years or 10 years, or, is there even someone out there? Why can't I find them? What is going on? And so when we start to even ask those more specific questions that the person wants to work on, often the Akashic record keepers will come back and talk about a variety of levels and layers of energies and emotions, blocks, often trauma, that is keeping that person stuck from moving forward and creating that loving, fulfilling relationship, or that career, that business, that job that they love, or even, sometimes it's in those more personal relationships with our parents or our children. So when we start to look at what is blocking us or stopping us or keeping us, feeling stuck or lost, it is often this emotional pain. It doesn't have to be, what I notice is often is there's kind of even a judgment that we have about our own trauma. Like for, I think, many, many, many years, I would think, well, my friends died. It's a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, obviously, for them and their families, but why would that be a big deal to me? Right? I would minimize my experience of it, even though it was very real and very painful. And my mother at one point said that she was afraid I might kill myself after she died, because I was feeling so lost and so abandoned, even by my friends and by God. And, so it was definitely a trauma, but I judged it as not that big of a deal, not that bad, right? Other people have, had terribly abusive parents, and that's a big trauma, or maybe they had a near-death experience. That's a trauma, right? So my judgment, I realized, around trauma was keeping me from healing my trauma,
there's a little metaphor that I like to use around trauma, because it's such a common thing to do, to minimize our trauma or try to compare it to somebody else's trauma. I know this is a hypnotherapist that people will, but it wasn't that bad. People come and say, but if you can imagine like a little pebble in your shoe, and it's under your foot and it's annoying. And so you start walking a little funny because it's in your shoe. And then as you start walking a little bit funny, then it starts to get your ankle a little bit wobbly, which starts to throw out your knee, which starts to throw out your hip, which starts to throw out your low back, which affects your shoulders and your neck and your head. And all of a sudden your whole body is in pain. And it's in pain because of all these compensations that you've made around this little pebble in your shoe. And that once you can remove that pebble, it allows you to walk in a more aligned way, but it still takes a little bit of time for that all those accommodations to sort of work themselves out a little bit that you've made around that one trauma. But I know from hypnotherapy, like I'll get a trauma. A really common one was people felt really abandoned as young children and they didn't know why. And it often would come down to being left in a crib. Like, it was the standard of the day. You let your kids cry themselves to sleep because, God forbid you pick them up and carry them around. So let them cry themselves to sleep. Well, from a child's perspective, they feel abandoned, especially if they're scared or if they're hurt or if they've done something. And it's all inadvertent. It was just parenting style of the time. But you have that little pebble of feeling abandoned. And then the next time something comes and like your parent is late from coming to pick you up at school or soccer practice or something, then you have that feeling of abandonment. And then it increases in size and it increases in intensity and it throws your body off a little bit more. And every other thing like that is stacked on top of it until we have all of these layers of this one trauma that may not even have been that big of a deal at the time, but it has become this huge theme in our life. And having the death of friends is certainly a larger trauma. So there's large traumas and there's little traumas, but they both magnify throughout a life until they really throw off your energy in so many different ways.
Yeah, and that's just such a fabulous description because it's true. And when it's the pebble that leads to this whole your body being completely thrown out, and we're now out of alignment. And it's a perfect description because not only are we physically out of alignment, but our soul becomes out of alignment. We're kind of misaligned to our higher guidance, to the guidance of our Akashic record keepers, or even some of our guides, our angels, or other guides that might be there to assist you. And so we feel often lost and alone and abandoned. I think that abandonment is one of the huge human things because we feel abandoned by source. We feel, why am I left here on this planet? Right. So, whether we think of it as in the more religious way of I've been abandoned by God or I've been abandoned by my tribe or my star family, whatever it might be. Again, it comes back down to that abandonment, and we just end up feeling lost and forsaken. And so abandonment is huge. And so we start to, what I found the great gift with the Akashic Records is a couple of things, is we're in the quantum field of the all. We're in source energy. So we're basically in the highest vibration that I believe there is. And certainly that I found that is accessible, right, to us humans. And so we can go in and we have these record keepers, these beings of light who are here just in service to you, right? Everyone has their very own record and record keepers, and they will tell us and help us to not only understand all of those levels and layers, but to work through clearing them. So we can do a lot of healing for ourselves around understanding, right? Just that wisdom and seeing like, oh, of course.
Right.
I was traumatized by my friend's death, which I probably didn't even realize till I was in my 30s. I never went to a therapist. Nobody talked about it. I just drank it away, right? So we can start to go, oh, aha, and that's a healing in its own right. So that aspect of witnessing and being witnessed and just seeing that bigger picture in the Akash is phenomenal. But then again, we can also go in, and what I love to teach my students to do is to go into this quantum field consciously we can move around outside of time and space. We can go back to, I would go back to when I was 13 and Marsha died, and I would go back to 19 when Shubi died, and I would go back to some of the whatever pain or emotional traumas I had after that, and energetically heal and clear. So we can literally release and dismantle that pain. It's like, to me, it looks almost like a white hot ball of energy that is just pain. And what happens with that energy of pain is, because we're very magnetic beings, we often draw more pain to us. Until some people have a very big, expansive pain body. And if you know anything about the more esoteric teaching, you've got your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body, your spiritual body, there is no pain body in there. But we create this pain body, which is actually a lot of pain points kind of that come to so strong that it creates an energetic pain body.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So people who have a lot of trauma, and often it will go into other lifetimes. So we're kind of bringing in some of that pain body because we want to heal it. We want to learn about it. We want to understand it so that we can completely release it. But it can create, this energy can create more pain. It can, with a really active pain body, it can draw more pain to us. And often that's when we get really stuck in kind of being the victim. And it looks like it feels like it, because we have this magnet of emotional pain. And so more people are showing up who have trauma to share with us. We end up with a job that has a bunch of, people with trauma, or, owners or bosses or other people we're working with who kind of energetically sharing their pain with us, or they're dumping their pain on us. They can, of course, nobody sees it with their eyes. Nobody knows it consciously, but energetically, we're kind of drawing that pain. And sometimes we're just taking on other people's pain.
Well, and one of the complicating factors for this that I've run into with people as well, when you're working from this level of trauma, and especially if they've got, like you're talking about, a pain body, and I've never verbalized it that way, is that when you kind of become a victim of that pain, and that pain and that trauma become part of your story and part of your identity and part of who you think you are, that we've got both the pain in and of itself to heal, but then we've got that whole aspect of needing to become who we are without that pain, who we are healed from that pain. And that's a whole different level of healing. So when you work with people in the Akashic Record to heal pain, do you also run into the dynamic of helping to heal the person from being one who identifies themselves as a victim of that pain?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, this is why I often say, learning to access your own Akashic Records, or working with someone like me or you, it's not a magic bullet. I can do phenomenal healing in an hour, but it's not a magic bullet, because we start to clear some of these emotional pains and traumas. And it's so important that we make sure to fill ourselves up, or fill our clients up, with their highest energy, light, physical level energy, or their Akashic energy information. But then they go out into the world and they bump up against often some of the same stories, some of those same people who were expecting them to take on their pain or hold them, and be the person who listens to all of their traumas or, drama or pain. And all of a sudden they are like, that feels weird. That doesn't feel very good. I don't know, and all of a sudden they start to push people away, and maybe they lose friends, and they're like, what's going on? All of a sudden I'm losing all my friends, right? And because it is truly a process. And, in all honesty, I was mentioning to you a little bit earlier, when I went to give my TEDx talk on a stage in Canada, we had 4 days of practicing. And when I had gotten up there, I had been practicing, but, memorizing has not been something I've ever really done, or, so I was
Mm-hmm.
trying all these different techniques. And one day I practiced about 10 times before I went down to practice in front of the group. And I felt like I really knew it. I had it. I got down in front of the group. I started talking about when Shubi died. I got all choked up. I started to cry and I couldn't go on. And I freaked out, of course, because I'm like, okay, I'm doing this talk on a stage in front of hundreds of people in 2 days. What, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I literally had to go back and do a whole nother level of healing around the loss of Shubi and Marcia,
Mm-hmm.
around feeling that it was important enough for me to do this TED Talk, to share this wisdom, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all of my self-doubt came up,
Yep.
my sadness, my abandonment, my on and on and on, right? So here
Yeah.
we're seriously looking at 50 years, right? Later,
Mm-hmm.
50 freaking years since Marcia died. And and I'm thinking, wow, okay. And again, it just kind of reinforced in my mind, this is why I feel it's so important. And my soul mission is to teach people to
Mm-hmm.
access their own Akashic records, because it's a gift that you can use again and again and again every day whenever things come up. Because again, there is no magic bullet. We can go to healers and healers and healers, and there's
Mm-hmm.
always another level or layer, right? We transform slowly over time. And it's almost like we have to keep, working with that clay, if you imagine, right? That you're
Mm-hmm.
modeling yourself into the highest and best, human being you can be. We keep working with that clay. We clear, we fill in, we integrate, we bring in new information. Energies on the planet change, people come and go. We heal some of our old soul contracts. We might release them. We might feel really good about going forward for a year or 5 or 10. I mean, and then
Mm-hmm.
something else might trigger us, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so soul growth is a huge process, and that's why it takes most of us, 600 or 800 lifetimes. Right?
Ain't that true? So one of the things I really like about working in the Akashic Record, like on a regular basis, for myself, and I do creative things in the Akashic Record and stuff, is that it gives you an experience of being your expanded self and of being in connection with your non-local soul level self. And that's a whole different experience of being. And the more time, I says for me, that I have discovered that the more time that I spend in those Akashic record, not having a reading with somebody else, but in my own record with my own guides, doing my own thing, the more comfortable I am with the multi-level whole being that I am, rather than this differentiation between my human self and this record of things that I can go to here and there to help me with my human experience. It becomes a much more integrated experience. And even when traumas and stuff come up, it's helpful to remember that sense, that space, that connection, because I know that even when I'm going through a trauma or something has resurfaced, that it's an experience that I'm having, but that the truth of me is much larger than my own local experience. So I don't know if that's true for
Yes.
you as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I agree, this is part of the process, that one of the reasons that we access our own records, and we can
Mm-hmm.
move into this energy. And the record keeper said to me many years ago, they said, this is its own path to awakening,
Mm-hmm.
because you are integrating all these different aspects of who you are as a infinite soul, and you are moving more fully into experiencing the energy of pure love,
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love. And um and this is really, who we are. And I realize one of the reasons that I love working in the records in so many ways, whether I'm, having a conversation like this with someone like you, the energy, we are actually in the Akash together. And so
Mm-hmm.
the listeners may feel that energy. It feels a little different. It's a beautiful, higher, unconditional, kind of love, kind of
Mm-hmm.
vibration. And so it's quite a gift and a blessing just to be able to open your records and hang out in that, whether you're asking a lot of deep questions and doing a lot of healing or getting information, or you're really just opening the records and being in that energy of peace and
Mm-hmm.
calm. And it was very fun. The other day I had bought a, what do you call it? It looks like a headband. It's called Focus Calm, and it reads your brain waves. So it's
Oh.
this new technology to
Mm-hmm.
read your brain waves. And so it's really about being able to know whatever it is you're doing that's bringing you into this calm state.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first got it, I put it on, and it was a Sunday morning. I was sitting in my bed with my coffee and just kind of hanging out and, well, just trying to meditate, right? Watching my
Mm-hmm.
breath, and then my little mind would go off and think of all the things I could be doing, or what on my to-do list still. And I
Mm-hmm.
always work. I'm kind of a bit of a workaholic, and so I kept looking at the app on the phone. Red is obviously kind of stress and tension.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow is whatever in between neutral. And then
Mm-hmm.
blue is calm. And what they say is that if you could just spend 7 minutes a day in that deep space of calm and peace,
Mm-hmm.
that helps to transform your health and your body. Really,
Mm-hmm.
because you're getting out of that level of stress. So here I am. I have about 10 minutes. I keep looking at the app, and it's yellow, and then it would drop to red because I get stressed out. But okay, I'm going to watch my breath. I'm dropping
Mm-hmm.
into my heart. I'm doing all these things. It's yellow, yellow, yellow. I said, I'm just going to open my records. And
Mm-hmm.
I said the first line of the access prayer that the record keepers have given me that I teach in my
Mm-hmm.
workshops. And I opened my eye a slit, and it was blue. And I
Mm-hmm.
just kept, I mean, literally, it was that instantaneous one sentence of the Akashic Access Prayer shifted me straight into the records. Now, this is because I've been doing this for,
Right.
30
Yeah.
years. And then as I just read the whole prayer and sat just calmly in that energy for about 5 minutes, and then I opened my eyes, and my husband had turned on a video, and I dropped into yellow, and I was like, okay, well, but it was like kind of phenomenal, technical, scientific
Yeah.
proof
Mm-hmm.
that using the Akashic Access prayers that I teach can move you
Mm-hmm.
with ease instantaneously into this peace, this Akashic field of unconditional love, peace, and
Yep.
calm. And it was like, wow, that was so cool, right? Because, of course, I can say that, I can know that, I can teach
Mm-hmm.
that, and my students have the experience. But for me to see it kind of in this more technological sort of way, I thought was
Yeah.
really, really phenomenal. And I thought it was just, I was kind of laughing that, dropping into my heart, watching my breath, and all the techniques were so not working for me. I was like, okay, well, not that they don't work for other people, but I just was laughing because I'm just like,
Well,
okay, just shift into that calm of
yep.
the Akash.
Well, and I've had a similar experience. I don't have that same technology, but I use the heart math technology
Yeah.
for, heart brain coherence. And the same thing, when whether it's coming into meditation, I've got a few things that drop me into a meditative state, or coming into the records, or those things where we train ourselves to drop into those states and be in those states can be a real tool to help cultivate those states and in all other areas. But I had a similar thing, and it goes red and blue and green. And when I'm in the records, and I'm not working in the records, but I'm just sitting in there or in deep meditation, like it pops up to green, and it's just this nice little green wave for minutes at a time until until something disrupts that.
Right,
And I
right.
pop that down into red. So, but it's, it's another one of those things that you can actually use as a tool to help you cultivate a calmer state. And then, and then work in there to find out, what's keeping you from being in that state more of the time, and finding those traumas that kind of kick us out of there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the Akashic records to move toward a state of emotional health.
Right, absolutely. And, as we were talking about, often when we start to transform, it can also be a little scary, right? And
Yeah.
again, like if we're raising our vibration and our friends are not happy because, and maybe, abandoning us because they're like, you don't want to party like you used to, or you don't want to
Yeah.
listen to all of my drama like you used to, or whatever it was. You're not doing all the things that I ask you to do for me anymore. You've stopped being codependent, or, whatever the thing is, as we start to change, finding these kinds of tools. And that's why I love, again, the Akashic records can help you not only continue to go back in, ask for more information, ask them for some healing energy, ask them to understand it in a bigger way, but it also allows us to move into the vibration of peace and calm and pure source love, which is transformational in its own right. So as we're on these paths, and I just know it's going to get bigger and stronger and clearer for everyone on the planet, that it's time for us to transform the whole planet, all of our thinking and our beliefs and our actions, so that we can, heal the world and start to heal all of the challenges that, have been coming up over the last couple of years to be redone. And having these kind of tools, like being able to access your own Akashic records, is just, to me, such a blessing, such a gift.
Okay, that actually brought something else up, because as much as we all have personal traumas, and everybody does, whether it's something that you can point to as a trauma, and it's like a death of a friend or a parent or a spouse or something, or if it's something like the pebble in the shoe, that somebody said something to you and it kind of built up over the years, whatever it is, we all have personal traumas. But right now we are going through a collective trauma. And we're going through a shared collective trauma, not just with COVID, and whether you've gotten sick, or a family member, or somebody who's died in your family, and these specific traumas that are quite personal, but the trauma of the collective having this experience, and how it is changing our collective space. So it's changing how we interact, it's changing how we work, it's changing the economy, it's changing everything. And those levels of change actually operate like traumas, because of the way that it activates things in our system. So if you think about this in terms of the Akashic record, and I hadn't actually ever thought about doing this, but is there a way to go into the record and maybe look at how we're healing, or how we can contribute to healing the collective around this particular trauma, or maybe old related traumas like plagues and other pandemics, and things that we might have gone through in the past that are being triggered again in our modern age? I'd never thought about that. Have you done any of that work?
Absolutely. Actually, I've done a ton of group healing work, because what the record keepers, of course, I ask about, what the heck is going on and why is this happening? And a lot of their answer about that is the world, society. We need to transform, and we're not just going to do it on our own because we just decided to, right? We need to do it in a bigger, more collective way. And one of the things that part of the lockdown has assisted with is letting the earth breathe a little bit more, right? You see a lot of the wildlife coming back. There's less traffic on the roads. There's less pollution, all of that, which has been good for Gaia herself and the wildlife. And it's also either been really helpful for so many people in having a little more time, like, oh, if you're not commuting an hour or 2 a day, or 3 hours a day, like some people do, maybe you spend a little more time with your family, with your spouse or your kids or your friends, or meditating. I have so many people who have just been like, I've just been waking up in this last year or two. And, now I have time to spend some time meditating, or take your
Mhm.
Akashic Record course, or take another healing course, or whatever it might be. But I see that more and more and more people have taken the added time to go more deeply on a spiritual path. And it's also offered for many people the ability to let go of maybe a job that they didn't like, that they didn't
Mhm.
feel was in alignment to them, and has allowed them either just to retire if they were kind of that age, or that
Mhm.
worked out for them, or to decide to create something new. And so a lot of people are starting to, again, whether they're being coaches or starting their own business. So I've seen really this kind of time and space as helpful for a lot of people who wanted to make some big changes in their lives. And of course, I also see it triggering so many people around being alone or lonely. And
Mhm.
of course, there's the whole death aspect where we've lost a lot of our loved ones and a lot of these different challenges. And part of what the Akashic Record Keepers say is that there are quite a few souls. We've got 7 or so billion people on the planet,
Mhm.
that there's a lot of souls who are ready to leave for, all sorts of soul reasons. It might not be
Mhm.
conscious as much,
Yeah.
but, they want to leave and help from the other side, because it's time to transform our whole world, to
Yep.
take care of our planet, to, be able to feed the whole world. There's no reason that we can't do that with technology
Oh
and
yeah.
become, right, more of a
Yep.
one world, one planet. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's what the record keepers are saying. And this next 9 years is really about us working on that, bringing in new beneficial inventions and technology to support feeding the world, and
Mhm.
healing the water shortages on the planet, and just coming into smaller communities where we really truly can support each other again.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
yeah, a lot of transformation coming really over the next 9 years. And when we bump up against a lot of our own emotional pain, it can be very helpful to go in and do some work in the Akashic Records about it. Like, why do I feel so lonely, and how can I help to maybe heal some trauma or emotional pain around that, so I can feel, you know, either happier to be alone and use that constructively, or to shift in some way that I can maybe spend more time with more people, whether I'm getting on Zoom with people or coming together in, small groups. I didn't see my father, who's 92, for almost a year and a half, so it was quite a
Wow.
blessing to get to be able to see him and spend time with him again. And so
Mhm.
just kind of, I think there's a whole aspect of us coming to a place where we move out of the fear and
Mhm.
realize this is our life, and we're going to make, good conscious decisions, but live our lives and not let ourselves be frozen in fear. And that's
Amen.
another big trigger that's come up with obviously with COVID. And so kind of
Yeah.
healing our fear.
Changes can be challenging, and it's easier to change when we let go of those things that we're holding on to consciously and unconsciously, that are keeping us in a spiral pattern of trauma and of victimization. So
Mm.
thank you. It's been great talking with you, Lisa. And can you tell us a little bit? I know you've got a home study course so that people can figure out and work with their records themselves, and also a book. And that, can you tell us a little bit about what people will find when they look at your bio on conversationsfromtheedge.net or in the show notes?
Absolutely. So I have a course that's a home study course where I teach you to access your own personal Akashic records in a literally, 12-hour 6-session workshop with manual, with bonus meditations, with support that way. And so that you can start to learn to access your own Akashic record keepers, have these conversations, learn more about who you are as that beautiful infinite soul conversing with your Akashic record keepers. And so that home study link is there in the show notes, as well as my free gift, which is a journey into the Akashic records as a guided visualization. And so people can just try that out if you just want to see what that feels like before you jump into doing a whole home study program. And then, of course, my TEDx talk, Emotional Trauma Revisited, is there, as well as a link to my third book about awakening to your life purpose by understanding your soul's plan.
Excellent. All right. Well, you can find all of those at conversationsfromtheedge.net and looking under Lisa's bio section or under the show notes. And thank you again so much for talking today, Lisa. It is always fun talking with you. And of course, talking about the records and this level of transformation and how we're transforming individually and collectively in this time is always one of my most favorite things to talk about.
Mine too. So it has been a joy and quite a pleasure, Christine. Thank you so much for having me on to share this Akashic wisdom with your listeners.
This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.